Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lokya Kahenge. Today we have with us Ram from Desi Brotherhood. Ram, we're so excited to have you here.
Yay! Hi,
Thanks.
guys.
Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, love your guys' content too. We've worked with each other a few times. So yeah, so happy to be back.
Thank you. And we're back. We just had like a beautiful session of catching up. And Ram, it's so
Yes.
nice to see you once more.
After so long, I mean, it's been months.
I know, yeah. Been really nice to catch up.
Yeah. And guys, we're here today because, well, Ram and us, we've been meaning to, catch up and do this once more. But we thought that the time was right now as well because recently Ram on his page, Desi Brotherhood on Instagram, put out a very, I will use the word again, I just use it, eye-opening post out. And this was about statistics across multiple countries in, Asia and surrounding areas, but as well as here in the West. And there were a group of statistics that I have personally never, as a woman, 26 in America, in New York, with a I often say this privileged life has never really seriously looked into. And I think I can say the
Yeah,
same.
same here. Yeah.
So when I read your post, it was exactly that. I was like, wait a second, what?
Yeah.
And it was surprising. The numbers on there are surprising. I know that stats actually in marketing, you might know this as well. We use it for shock value, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
that was not shocked. That was like just astounding disbelief to me that that's what's happening in the
Right.
world and continues to. So tell us what made you, put that out there in the first place, and where would you like to start with the world knowing that this exists, this is happening?
Yeah, so it actually just started with me watching a documentary that my cousin recommended, and it was like a BBC one in the UK, and it was about Pakistani bus culture and how there's a lot of abuse for kids that are like homeless or street kids, basically. So obviously those are kids that are, in poverty or lower class. So I was just really interested in this documentary, and I was watching it, and I was just so shocked by the stats on what the documentary was mentioning. And it's on YouTube, so you can definitely watch it. You can literally just type in Pakistani BBC documentary, male rape abuse, or bus culture in Pakistan. And I was just really surprised with how prominent it is, and especially the stats with it being like 90% will be abused, and how they were saying that there are less females out on the streets because families are worried about them being abused. But then I was like really shocked at how like the boys are being neglected, or like the boys are just being left to kind of defend for themselves. And the documentary was just really eye-opening because a lot of the abusers were talking about how they can't handle and control what they're doing. A lot of the victims were talking really honestly about how it's kind of messed them up and has led them to kind of do drugs and stuff in Pakistan, such as heroin. A lot of like crack cocaine is big there, especially if you're on the streets. And I was like really surprised because I was like, wow, this abuse is obviously leading them to have even more trauma with their life and taking them down a bad path. And I was like, there's not a lot of, well, I wasn't aware of it, aware of the situation. And I was like, there's not a lot of like research and information out there in these communities, especially within South Asian. So I was like really surprised that I hadn't heard of this before. And then when I went traveling, I kind of put two and two together. And then when I went traveling in 2018 and 19, there was loads of different people I met in India. And a lot of like the men that I'd met, actually, once we kind of got comfortable with each other and had a drink and we're talking about South Asian culture and the pressures that we go through, and we had good banter and stuff as well. But I would say at least like maybe 7 out of 10 out of the people that I'd met had told me about sexual abuse that they dealt with as a kid. And it was from a family member. One person was even talking about it being in a Hindu temple where they were staying overnight to go on a long journey on like this pilgrimage thing. So like really, really like tough stories to listen to. And I was just really shocked at again, how many different people that I was meeting traveling had gone through like the same thing. And then like I was like just thinking like, hold on, if this is going on in Pakistan and this is going on in India, and like me and my friends in the West, in the UK, I've talked about experiences that we've dealt with as kids, which were kind of like borderline or, you know, like this on the spectrum of sexual abuse. I was like, wait, is this like a global thing that's happening? And I was like, how much of it is actually impacting boys, and why isn't there enough information on it? So then I was like literally up till like 2, 3 a.m. that night after watching the documentary and after thinking about my traveling experiences and the people that I'd met. And I just found even more information in like boys being having to deal with like sexual abuse or rape, being molested and stuff in so many different countries. It happens literally everywhere, even in the West. That's why I put on the last slide like the stats on the West. And I don't think it's about like where it happens more and why does it happen more there and or whatever. I think it's just like, you know, it just needs to be talked about that, especially when it's young children, whether it's a girl or a boy, there's an equal chance of both of them being sexually abused. And then I was just like really surprised with everything else. So I was looking into, you know, the Bakabazi situation in Afghanistan, where again, it's a very much an open secret where people are aware of it. A lot of like police officers and stuff are going into these kind of brothels where young boys are like, even at the age of like 6, being used as prostitutes because there's not enough females around, or a lot more females are kept inside the home. And then I was like, okay, wow, this is like a global issue, and there is literally hardly any information. Like when I was even searching male rape cases and stuff, it was very much about what the problems men are causing in society and how men do rape. And, you know, there was even a few articles, like top few articles about saying good men don't rape. But then I was like, hold on, what if you're a man who went through sexual abuse looking for specifically male services? And I really, really did struggle with it. And I literally had to like dumb it down in Google with like the keywords to really find the stats and information and find these services.
Wow.
So then I was like, you know what? I think a lot more people need to be aware of it and aware of the stats. And again, like you said, I was like, you know what? I'm going to use the stats as shock value, just to really kind of educate people on how, you know, this isn't a situation where we should just have services which are catered around, you know, young girls. I think, you know, as much as we're worried about our young girls, you know, facing sexual abuse, we should be worrying about young boys. And like, even when I go to India in the village, when I go see my family, even my aunties and uncles, like they'll say to my younger cousins, oh, you can go outside now with Ram because he'll look after you. But then if the young boys who are like, you know, 6, 10, 12, they wanted to go out, it was completely fine. You know, my aunties and uncles had no problems. And I was like, hold on, like, you know, if you're completely acceptable of like the young boy going out and like looking after himself, you know, aren't you also, you know, worried that if an adult male or even an adult female was, you know, it's supposed to, you know, try and do something to this kid, it's not necessarily about her, you know, them being a girl, so they're more unsafe, and that child being a boy, so he should be able to look after himself. So I was like, okay, hold on, you know, how do I not even know that my younger cousins haven't gone through this, right? Because if they're able to wander the streets compared to my younger female cousins, then the stats are clearly there. I was like, what if something's happened to them? So I was like, you know what, let me just educate and, you know, let people know. And it was just something that was really important to me. Obviously, any kind of abuse, I think, needs to be educated within the community. And I think South Asians, we kind of avoid the topic around sexual abuse a lot just because it's so taboo, or even just talking about, I think, rape or sex or whatever is very taboo. So, yeah, that kind of made me write the blog and stuff.
Thank you. You know, I want to, you know, just say thank you for doing that. Because just think about it for a second, what you said, right? Like, and I often talk about it from like a tech world perspective. Right. Our information is actually controlled by, you know, private companies. And the fact that like, you know, an algorithm give you trouble in even spitting out statistics about these things. It's a horror story about how unreported, and then uninformed we are about these things. All right. And so thank you for doing that research. Thanks for continuing to do it and speaking about it. so many things that you just said in there, right? You talked about, I think it begins from the impression that it's a guy, it's a male, for the simplest of terms, and so they're okay, they're going to be fine.
Right.
But for somebody who is clearly, whatever their intent is behind doing such a terrible thing, to them is just a body.
Right.
And so that is scary. That is scary, and it's not okay. To layer on the fact, like multiple layers, that we are indeed uninformed, and we do consider even the words rape, sex, or abuse.
Even abuse, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
There are so many. Manahal and I often roll our eyes at news sometimes that we hear from back home, and they have all these words, right?
Like around it, like these code words, like something bad happened,
Yeah.
or something along those lines.
Yeah, one that I've actually heard is zyati, which
Right.
is basically if I take your, Manahil, for example, if I take your cup of coffee
Right.
for the morning, and that's the only cup of coffee, I could say that, I did zyati with her, which is I disadvantaged her in a
Right.
way.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So it's so vague, right? And
Yeah.
that's, if that's the same word that they use to explain rape,
Right.
I think that has vastly different meanings. And so, hey, I'm not an expert on the Urdu language. It's just, my mother tongue. But if somebody
Yeah.
listening to this is hearing it and wants to correct me, please do that.
Right.
But to me, that feels like we are, going around the problem. We're dancing around the problem. And to me, if we can't even call the problem by its proper name, which I don't even know in Urdu,
Right.
then how are we ever going to address that these things exist?
Right.
Exactly. And I think the massive implications on that is when you walk around the subject, when you don't address it and just say what it is directly, and even educate, the younger generation and your daughters and sons, people, especially as boys, girls, I think they're maybe taught a lot more in the sense, maybe indirectly, by staying in the house more. You've got to stay
Right.
safe. Look at the way you're dressed. What if somebody does this to you? What if somebody kidnaps you, right?
Right.
They wouldn't even say the word rape, but they'll say somebody might do this to you, grab
Right.
you or do something abusive, but again, not go into details of what. But then boys aren't taught that. So
Right.
what I learned when reading up the information is a lot of boys did not report this because they just thought, oh, this is part of me being a man. I have to go through this as part of being a man. So it was part of almost how you go through puberty. You're okay, cool. Now I'm going into the next stage of evolving as a teenager, as a man. That's what they saw that sexual abuse encounter as. And to be honest, I've never publicly really spoken about it, but I mean, me and my friends have spoken about it, but even a lot of the males that I've got in my social circles, when we've talked about situation that happened to us when we were younger, which was kind of on the lines of sexual abuse, I also thought it was just, part of, the process of being a man. And I thought maybe I was supposed to like it. Maybe I was supposed to accept it. Maybe this is why men are so obsessed with sex and stuff. And now it's just part of my journey. I was oh, cool. I guess every guy goes through that, right? Every guy gets maybe, has some experience of sexual abuse. And yeah, that's kind of what, I guess, because we're so avoidant on educating people and actually realizing that this happens to boys too. A lot of boys, even myself, just thought it's part of the process of becoming a man. Which I think is the biggest, scariest thing, because then afterwards they're keeping it internally, they're erratically taking it out in other ways. And this is why I think a big reason why it's especially South Asian men, and that's the only kind of way I can think, I can only speak from my perspective as a South Asian man. I think that's why there's a lot of hidden issues with us wanting to escape from our reality, or having anger issues and anger problems and stuff. And it's it's because we're not going through the details of maybe something that we went through as a childhood or traumas and stuff. So
I'm sorry to hear that. Because, what you've just explained is that we're not taught correctly, right?
Right.
We're not taught correctly. I personally have never And, again, we're open people. So it's totally, I mean, I'm happy to say this. We've never had like a direct, sex talk with parents.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, like,
So true.
us personally, we, like, our parents are pretty, like, open-minded, and we always, do notice that and acknowledge that we come from a place of privilege. So, we'll talk about it in, like, we, like, beat around the bush and, like, talk about it in, like, a certain way, but not exactly using those words. But we know that not everybody has that kind of a relationship with their parents.
Definitely
No,
not.
So
exactly.
it's like,
I mean, I never really had that with my parents. And then, like you're saying, like now as an adult, even if we did, it's very like
Right.
walk around the subject and
Right.
like you don't really say certain words. And I remember we were watching that Bollywood film Pink with Amitabh Bachchan. Have you seen it?
No.
I don't think so.
It's a really, really good film, and it's basically about these three girls living in Mumbai, and one of them goes through sexual abuse, and they go through the whole legal system and court and stuff. And we were watching it as a family, and my dad was like explaining something to me, and he was just he said the word rape or sex or something, and then as soon as he said it, he like held his mouth as if like he said like something so taboo and so wrong, and it was probably like the first time I've even heard him say the word, and I was thinking like, wow, like he's as an older man, South Asian man, he's finding it so uncomfortable to even say that when it's a reality that happens all over the world, and especially in somewhere like India. So it's just really surprising that he was struggling to even say that word in front of his family, because it's like it's such an awkward taboo thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do struggle.
How, unfortunate, because I guess like I want to unpack what you said about, we know now at this point, when I know more and I know better and I've talked to other people and I've talked to my friends, did not even think that was that was actually on the spectrum of sexual harassment. I would even venture to say that, like, it is under that umbrella, because think about it for a second, right? Like, so it's so weird, but I just last week I completed the sexual harassment training for work, right? And and almost all the examples that I had like in front of me, literally 9 out of 10 were like, something being initiated by a guy to a girl, and this isn't a training, right? Or like like a man to a woman, and like maybe one was like where and a case study was like given to me. It was like Jane said that John looks like sexy in his new work pants or something like that. Is this sexual harassment? And I was like, yes. But all the more horrific examples of like groping or like like touching inappropriately, etc., were presented in the light that only a guy can initiate this.
Right.
And that was pretty much it. That's actually, by the way, sexual harassment training industry standard in 2021. I don't agree with it.
Right.
But that's what it was. And it kept me wondering and thinking. And of course, like, we're here talking about this right now. We recognize things in the way that the information is presented to us. What do you think, Ram? Like, what is missing right now? There's a lot missing right now, but where can we at least start educating, and when do we start educating, ideally, kids, I guess, and say, if somebody even says that, an inappropriate thing to you, that is considered harassment, something that you should report, right? And then at the end of it, actually, how do you even, and who do you report it to? Because I feel like there's a disconnect between hey, if something bad happens to you, this is it. But then you need like authority figures or someone older than you to handle that situation if you happen to be under 18, for if we're going with the definition of an adult here with age.
Yeah.
I feel like we're missing all of that.
Yeah. I feel like the basic knowledge is not there, but this also reminds me, I was at my grandparents' house and they were watching like the regular Urdu news channel GNN, and this animated video came on, and it was like 4 kids, and the narrator was saying, and it was all in Urdu, and it was like these 2 kids, and the narrator was saying it was like a really nice animated video, like a cartoon, and the narrator was like, oh, like, there's two types of people who are gonna like love you and touch you or something along those lines, and then one of them is gonna be a family member or like somebody you love. But then sometimes it's like somebody who's touching you in the wrong way or something, and if this happens, you should go tell your adults or somebody you trust. This is what it says. I'm gonna try to find it, and this was on GNN. Can you believe that? It was a short animated clip with like music going on in the back, but I was like, I actually looked up at the screen, and I never watched the news like at my grandparents' house, but I was like, wow, this is like really awesome.
That is
I completely forgot about that, but yeah.
That's I think the main, I mean, like seeing things like that, like just being more like honest and like having like even advertising and stuff about it, like is really important. But I think the main issue on why, like, well, the reason I guess I didn't and some of my friends why we didn't tell our parents, it's like 1 minute we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about rape, we don't talk about anything like that, and then next minute once their kid goes through it, they're like, why didn't you tell me? And it's like, well, we don't really have those types of conversations, and for years you've kind of been telling me like those things are wrong to talk about or even to like think about or like be aware that it's going on and stuff. So I think that's the problem, is like parents don't really have those conversations with their kids about like if somebody does this to you. It's like we said, it's talked around the subject. Like somebody might kidnap you or abuse you, but they're not going into detail on like what that abuse involves, or like they don't even say like how that abuse could involve a family member, which is like a massive statistic as well. A lot of the abuse does happen from somebody you know. So it's just like, I think that's a massive issue, is like 1 minute we're not talking about it and then we're expected to talk about it as adults, but it's like turning in that transition is so difficult because we're just so used to obviously never really addressing that situation. And then I think like another issue is I think girls are constantly told that it's their fault. So, they shouldn't be dressed like this. They shouldn't be talking the way they have, and they shouldn't have acted this way. And you've been given the wrong impression, and we've told you time and day, like, you should be a good girl and you should be this. And then boys are taught like that they should almost handle it. And I guess like this is just a part of how it is for a man. Or like, I think another thing is that it's emasculating, right? To be like, I was sexually abused. That's a very like, again, it's like a female ideology that it's only females that get sexually abused or touched or raped or whatever the spectrum is. And I think like once a guy goes through that, it's like, well, I'm just not going to tell anybody because now I'm going to look like a woman, or now I'm going to look feminine. And it is really emasculating. Like I only spoke about it, I'd say, when I was 26. And I think even to this day, like I still, if someone was like, oh, you were sexually abused, I'd be like, no, because I don't know why. I just find it so hard to just face the reality of it, because it's like, I don't know. And I feel, I don't know, it's mainly more like, I think, females are, I guess, more seen as the women that usually are the victims of like rape cases and stuff, and I just find it hard to like hear the fact that I was a victim of sexual abuse, or like people I know that are men also struggle with admitting that they were victims of sexual abuse, because it's not seen as the men thing or the manly thing, I guess. So I think it's that. I think one, they don't talk about these things from sex, rape, abuse, and they don't go into detail. And they don't even, like, parents don't even say, if this does happen to you, it's not your fault. Right. So, like, it's always been told, like, if this happens to you, it's because you done this or you done that and you were, like, acting like this. It's constantly, like, blame, blame, blame. But parents don't educate, like, if this does happen to you, come to me about it, one, which is a normal thing to do. And two, if it does happen to you, it is not your fault. You are the child. And I think just more like healthy conversations like that is definitely the way. And you know what, like a lot of South Asian people, like my parents' generation, they're so like religious and stuff. And I'm like, maybe these conversations should be happening. I don't know, like if they were like having a talk or something in a religious hall or something, and just saying, listen, guys, we need to have these conversations a lot more. It's happening in our community. So I think those are the reasons, and I guess that's the kind of way to educate. Just I know I said loads of different things then. So
no, all great things, and even I feel like in school, I know like here in the West it's a little different, but like I know like schooling back home, they would never include any of this stuff ever. Not even to this day, I don't think that they would.
I don't think so. And you know what? I think that you just pointed out why, right? Like religions, the
Right.
ones that we're specifically, from originate from and stuff. It's the belief is all about there is no such thing as premarital sex,
Yeah,
right? Let's be honest.
exactly.
So oh my god, like for an unwed guy or a gal or whoever to talk about it, or even it is it because it's happening, and that itself is
Yeah.
like you're shunned into this hole of like if you're talking about it that means that you oh my god you're doing it and that's
Yeah.
sin.
Mm.
And I think that that is an added layer of taboo-ness, if that's a word. It's not.
Right.
That's added on top, and I think that that's wrong. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Like the first health class that I had that actually talked about safety and sex and etc. It was when I
Yeah.
was here in New York.
Yeah. We don't have health classes back home. I only
Yeah.
had like maybe like one conversation in like gym class. That was like an only girls gym class with my teacher about like not even sex, but like girls' health and like periods and stuff, but not like actually this stuff
No.
at all.
No.
It was only when we got here, I think.
Yeah.
Wow. And
Agree.
I think the education, it comes on both sides as well, in the sense of obviously the victim, but a lot of the perpetrators that were doing these sexual acts and sexual abuse on children, young boys and young girls, they didn't see it as abuse because they said, well, they didn't even see it as like haram and stuff because they were like, well, I'm not having a love relationship with the child, so therefore it doesn't count as me sinning. So that was another big one that I saw. So yeah, especially I think it was like I think it was in my post. I think it was the Afghanistan one about the Bakabazi, and a lot of the men didn't see it as a problem because they were a child and they didn't love them. So therefore, it's not haram and it's not seen as
Oh.
being homosexual. And then I've just looked up the stats now from the post, and 1 in 3 believe that raping a boy is neither a crime or a bad thing. So it's like we need education on both sides because the people that are doing it are clearly like messed up and
Yeah.
not educated and not seeing the impact on what it's doing, or maybe they don't care. But I think there is a massive like education problem. And when I go to India and meet my cousins and stuff, they get so excited to like. I think I mentioned it in one of my earlier episodes with you guys, but they were just like really hypersexual because they're not talk about like relationships and love and having a boyfriend, having a girlfriend. So they come to me as the kid that's from the UK and has the freedom to like love who I want, be with who I want, and have these experiences. And you can tell they're all kind of like really wanting to get the education about it. And you can see why they're so like hypersexual as well, because it's like it's never talked about. It's such a big thing. So they end up kind of like getting really kind of like almost obsessive about it. And then they obviously aren't realizing what's wrong and right. And one of the things that really shocked me when I was in India a few years back is one of my cousins was just asking me about, if I've had a girlfriend and who I've been with and stuff. And then he asked like if I had sex, and he was like at 12, 13 at this point. And I was like, you know what? I just want him to realize that relationships, consensual relationships, are normal in the UK. And I wanted him to just like be more educated about it because I was like, nobody else is going to teach him. So
Right.
this is my chance to kind of explain it to him. So I said, yeah, in the UK, it's a consensual thing. If a female wants sex and a man wants sex, they end up, having sex. And they can then lead that on to a relationship if they want to. And sometimes you get heartbroken. Sometimes you decide to leave the relationship. Just trying to really normalize this kind of conversation because they don't have this in the village. And then he said to me, and then when the girl doesn't agree, you rape her, right?
Oh.
And I was like, whoa. And I was just like shocked, obviously, like coming from the UK and hearing my younger cousin, blood cousin, saying this. I was like just shocked, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna like flip and scream and just shout at him because
Right.
that's clearly not gonna do anything. So I was like explaining to him that like you must never do that to a female, you must never do that to anybody. And I was just saying to him, like, people will give you more respect and you're respected as a man more if it's like, agreed that you both want to have consensual sex. And he was like, oh, and then he was like, I'm joking, because he saw that I was like really shocked by what he said. But I was like, no, I just need you to listen like right now. And I was just explaining to him like that is never the way to go. And I was just so shocked that he'd even said that. But again, because they're not taught this, like maybe that's why their thinking is just going, do you know what I mean? Sporadically, like left, right, and center, and they're thinking like abuse is fine, and I'll just force someone to do it.
I can't even, you handled it so beautifully. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I'm kind of speechless right now, because it's sort of, yes, and on the flip side, and to be honest with you, like I've had this when I was looking at your post and reading about your post and stuff like that. I was thinking of that, right? Like how much light there is about these things happening to women and how it's happening to men, and then I read exactly, we talked about, those comments underneath and stuff like that. And one thing that I was noticing was that there has to be a balance of, light on both things. Right. What you've just told me right now, I am thinking that people learn by what they see around them. Right. And they, and clearly there is so much news about it. There's so much, there's bad examples, unfortunately, in movies about it and in media about it. And, on the flip side, I have heard girls say or women say, but you know what? It's okay. It's normal. He's my husband.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So he's not doing anything bad. It's his right. So I am I feel like what you've just said has triggered that.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but it's true.
I know so many. Trust me, there's this one friend, and now a very, very distant, unfortunately, acquaintance. But the talk about having contraceptives, or the talk about abstaining, or the talk about child planning or something like that was not even on the table because of the fact that this guy has waited so long to get married and have sex that this is my person to do with whom as I please. And the woman in that particular relationship just accepts it and doesn't even know what's good for her needs versus what she's only known, and that's just this guy, right? So what you've just explain it to the person as is exactly that. I don't think that we're taught to have a healthy relationship with sex in general.
No.
Right. And
a lot is left to just when it happens, it happens. Honestly speaking, it's actually I'll call this a privilege to even be sitting here and talking to you guys about it.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. I know so many still friends, back home and stuff like that are very uncomfortable with this. And I'm just talking about girls in general. Forget about it with the dude.
Yeah. Yeah. But I found the same, even at university and stuff, and even my friends actually, massive. I mean, when you talked about contraception and the use of condoms and stuff, I remember because I worked for this side project as a freelancer on this HIV project, and there was a Punjabi man in the UK that gave his wife HIV because he'd been sleeping with another woman on the side, maybe a prostitute or whatever. And they were really public about, the effects of HIV and to educate South Asian people to, have these normal chats about sex, diseases, contraception and stuff. And then I was working on this massive HIV project, and I asked all my friends and my circle groups, and I was like, how often do you guys use condoms if you do decide to have sex? And all the females have said no, they don't. And they just said, well, I just didn't think I needed to. I just didn't think I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. They used the pill and stuff to make sure, but they didn't have enough education on the diseases that are out there and how they could be exposing themselves to all these things that we're taught, we should be taught about. But I think, again, it's just that lack of education. Even coming from the UK, I don't think I was ever taught about, okay, I was taught on, wear a condom and blah, blah, blah. But it was never they never explained, the diseases and how you can catch them and then why you should be wearing it and stuff. It was always like the fear of pregnancy and this, that, and the other. But then so many of my friends, even in the UK, as South Asian people that were having sex, they were on the pill, but they weren't protecting themselves from all these other diseases. And that's another major factor as well. You know, globally, like HIV, AIDS is a prominent issue and not enough people are educated about contraception.
So true. So true. Right. And honestly, like, you know, I'm thinking about our trajectory of our conversation right now, and you know, to bring it back, if we don't start getting comfortable with talking about these things, whether it be abuse or what a healthy relationship with sex looks like, etc., so many sub branches of all of these things are just unaccounted for.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, literally, we've talked about HIV, how the perpetrator needs to be educated, how also the females sometimes accept, oh, well, that's just my man and that's my husband who's just going to do as he pleases to me and I just have to accept it. Then we're leaving the young girls, the young boys. It's like literally on every single angle. And yeah, I think that's why so many South Asians even have like a bit of an unhealthy and like a gap of education around sex. And like, again, from my cousins in India and stuff, with like the new technology world now, when they do look up what sex looks like, it's all this porn, which is like massively abusive. And like my cousins were like 12, 11 and one was 9. And I caught them all watching it on their phone and it was like really, really aggressive like sex. And I was like, this is not even giving them a healthy look. And then I was like, no wonder why he said the rape thing then to me, right? Because like that's what he's watching. So that's what he's thinking as well.
Yeah, there's a huge because I'm like a huge person on Twitter, so like I'm always on Twitter for my news and stuff. And there's a huge debate going on about like banning Pornhub and stuff because there's so much. I don't know. They found like a video of like some 15-year-old girl who had been missing, and then there was a video of her on there.
Oh my god!
So first of all, that's child pornography right away. And then that got into the debate of like how aggressive and how like it's all made up. You know, it's all made up. Somebody is directing the video, so it's all made up. So how aggressive, how like unreal it is, you know, and the show I was watching, Euphoria, I don't know if you watched it, it's amazing. On there they also talk about this issue and how like, you know, guys think it's okay to like do certain things to girls when they're like even if it is consensual sex, they you know, treat them a certain way because they've just seen it in porn. And I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that, you know. So it was very eye-opening. So everybody's like, no, like ban all these like sites, and I get it, I don't get it, you know, they're making a lot of money from that, but like, you know, people are like, how are we gonna make money, blah blah, but like it's insane what's on there. Like some of the things I was reading, it was crazy.
Yeah, and like the access to like technology and stuff. I mean, if you're like 12 and 11 and like that's the first thing you see about sex, and then all the other videos you're watching is about that too, whether you're a female or a young boy or whatever, like that's like, if that's your first way of being educated about it, and then you're in a village in India or Pakistan or wherever around the world, and you're not able to talk about it to your family, but you're watching it on all this like different medias and stuff on your phone, on the TV or whatever, and like that's your first glance of it, I think, that's a big problem. And I think there needs to be like people in the community like willing to talk about it. If parents don't want to talk about it, maybe it should be like the teachers in these like communities, or I don't know, you know, I'm not like the professional or the expert here, but I'm like, damn, we need to educate these people and these kids.
It's true. Definitely. Because pair that with hypersexuality or like straight up mental illness in some cases, and unfortunately that adds up to the statistics that you put out, you know. It people become numbers, and that sounds so simplified and basic, but it stems from these things. Like I am not even going to like, I think I say this almost about like every topic that we talk about, but our parents and their generations, and definitely generations before them and stuff like that, they are not equipped to handle technology today. Yeah. They have no clue. They have no clue what's going on. Like I was just like, me as like, you know, a person who works in tech and stuff like that, like I was just asking Manahil about like, you know, these like horrible weird fetishes that like people have started to make money off of during this pandemic, right? And girls think that it's okay to, you know, chop off their hair and send it to a person, or send like feet pics and stuff like that. And I was thoroughly horrified
and disgusted
because I was like, you know, there are creeps in this world who are going to, you know, solicit these things and stuff like that, but somehow it is being normalized under, you know, hey, this is my way of like
making
money or freedom of expression, and, you know, all of that stuff. And I was literally thinking like how much there's a gap of knowledge between what our adults know or like these kids' parents know and what's actually going on out there. And so I think you're right. Like, being ahead of all of this means that you have to start with like education and having those uncomfortable talks with your kids, even though they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's true, because like, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say that, and just making sure, like, even when we are educating the kids and stuff, because, I mean, it's a really tough subject to talk about, right? I mean, I remember, like, my parents, like, they would say, if somebody says at school that they're here to pick you up, you don't talk to them and you don't trust them and stuff. But, like, you know, that was, like, the little bit that I knew about maybe kidnapping, abuse, or whatever. But like, these are really tough conversations to have. So I understand why parents like maybe find it difficult. And if their parents didn't teach them about it, and they're like, well, I got on fine, so maybe the next generation will. It's like, no, because we're constantly evolving. So now kids are talking to randomers online in these chat rooms, or like you were saying, like sending their hair and their feet pictures or whatever. And if they're underage and stuff, like it's insane. So it's like, yeah, you might have been okay, and maybe it was a different time then, but we're constantly evolving as a society, and you just need to be like normalizing the fact that this could happen, I think, to your child. I think every parent needs to kind of accept that and teach the child, you know, boy, girl, whatever, that it is not their fault if it does happen, you know, because you can be lured into it, you can be, you know, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to add.
That's true. Yeah, no, like you said, like, it is a different time. There's more ways to be involved in these kind of things now. Like the whole OnlyFans thing. You know, anybody could make an account, get on there and do whatever they want. They'd be like, oh yeah, I'm making money. But like, there's a way that you're always going to get traced back to, like, you know, you could always get traced back to where you are, who you are, even if you're just sending like a freaking elbow picture or something, because that apparently is also a fetish. So, you know, you can always get traced back. So parents, I guess, just don't know that there's all of these ways to, like, that their kids could get involved. So I think parents are doing their best to be, like, educated on it. But I think that if we did normalize these conversations, the kids could maybe educate the parents as well. That, hey, there's, like, these, you know, there's 1,000 other things going on as well.
I agree. And actually that goes back to what you were saying. There's somebody in the community that needs to take a, you know, or if they feel like they're, you know, more comfortable, I guess, talking about these things, then like just step up and say, because there are lives and, you know, people's lives on the line, to be honest with you. What you were talking about, like something happening to you, not recognizing that this happened to you might have an impact, will have an impact from all the stories that we have heard down the line, or you know, then. And unfortunately, it's not seen as that, right? It's seen as what you were talking about, like, you know, it can have stereotypes, right? Archaic, I feel, stereotypes about like, this doesn't happen to guys, it happens to girls, and and so I really, honestly speaking, lately I've been so fascinated and just straight up inspired by guys who've just been talking about these things. And you know, you're definitely one of them, so thank you so much.
Oh, thanks so much.
And I just actually also followed a book, I think, that came out. It's Man Enough by Justin Baldoni. Wow. He's an actor, and he wrote this book for his son. And you know, he talks about from the small synopsis of it, because it's just coming out, is exactly what it means to be, you know, man enough. And so I'm looking forward to that. I think that I'm definitely going to like read up more on this, because I feel like as as a person who is obviously very much into all things women. I feel like us, even as girls or women, we need to think about, and we should be thinking about, or choose to think about, as my therapist would want me to say, like the issues that are maybe the men in our lives faced, and just have an open ear and mind, that it could be happening closer to home than we think.
That's true.
Definitely, I think that's exactly the kind of outlook that I want people to like go ahead and think about from now on. And I think that was just like the encouragement of my post. Just have more of an open mind about it. Do your own research and just make sure we're just educating as much as we can with our parents, our younger siblings, or whoever it may be. And I think just knowing that it can be closer to home than you think, because a lot of the stats show that. So I guess one question I had for you guys was, what was your kind of education around, like your first kind of, did you guys talk about things like rape culture or sexual abuse or even like sex with your parents? Or was there anybody that you could talk to, like an older sibling, an older cousin, like as two Pakistani girls? Like, what was that like in your culture, in your households?
I feel like each other, mostly.
Okay.
But not gonna lie, like back home, movies and TV shows and media really affected, at least for me personally, like really, that was the first kind of like, oh, like sex is a thing. But I remember my first sex talk being with her, and then this, we have this, not cousin, but a very close family friend. And she's like a couple years, she's like maybe a year older than Kinza, but they told me what like it is and like why. And you were like 11 or 12 yourself, right?
Yeah, I was.
Like not that old, but I remember that being my like very first sex conversation.
I second that, because I am the oldest from my dad's side, and we were living over there. But this particular person she's talking about was definitely like my first, talk with somebody a year older than I was, and we were not that old. And I feel like the information that we had was very basic, in the sense that yes, sex is a thing, and yes, periods are a thing, and yes, like, so it's very like there, but I cannot even begin to. And we actually went to a co-education school, so like we existed with other guys and girls together. So it was taboo to begin with, actually living in Pakistan and going to such a school, because you were automatically labeled as somebody who was very into relationships and sex and all of those things. At 11 or 12, you're absolutely right. I didn't even think about that. But it was not healthy at all. Everything was hypersexualized. Everything was hush hush.
Like the movies, really. I feel like the movies and like what we saw in TV and stuff. But I'm talking about like Hollywood.
I'm talking about Hollywood
like
too.
even like kissing was like a new thing. I was like, huh, like what, but like I was watching it, and then like, whatever I was watching, even like I remember like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah,
when like Daphne
that.
and Fred kiss, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? Like, so that was like my first kind of, oh, like this is a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about things like sexual abuse or like rape culture? Was that ever like kind of, were you warned about it, or was it just like nothing like that? No? Okay.
Nothing.
We're shaking our heads. No.
Only here.
Only here. Yeah, which is about 10 years ago now, right?
Yeah. And that's just for like what happens to girls. I feel like and like this is probably very ignorant of you to not like research myself, but I think my first like an example that I saw of like something that informed me of like guys being sexually abused was the TV show I just watched, A Teacher. It's like very popular, and it's about like the teacher grooming her student. And it was all like, oh, like, they were, at the end, she was like, oh, like, we, it was consensual, or like, you loved me, or I loved you. Like, throughout the TV show, he's like, I love you. And then she just, like, lets it happen. And all of his friends are like, good job, man. Like, you got it on with our teacher. Like, that's awesome. Like, everybody was like appreciating him even in college, but it left him so messed up. And then at the end, they show like him realizing that it was actually like sexual abuse and it was all her fault. You should really watch it. It's a crazy show.
And like that's honestly was my experience. Like when I went through like, you know, something that touched on like sexual abuse when I was younger and stuff, I was like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to enjoy it. And this is like, you know, because men enjoy sex and stuff. So I was like, okay, as a boy, I shouldn't really. And then I think I just blocked it out in my memory. And then it was only these things, like as much as you like block shit out from your childhood, it will come and creep back up. And like, that's what I realized at like 25. I was like, oh shit, okay, hold on. Like I was still struggling to admit that it was sexual abuse, but even then I was like, well, maybe I did something to cause that, or like maybe I, you know, enjoyed it secretly and stuff. And it was like me, but again, putting the blame on me, because like there is literally no education about what boys are supposed to do if you're sexually abused. And I'm not saying it's easier for girls, because it's definitely not. I think it's even harder, but I just felt so lost. And yeah, it was just like, I think for years I was just like, was it sexual abuse? Like, did I do anything to lead there? Maybe it was my fault or whatever. So
thank you for sharing that. And if I may ask, and if only you're comfortable answering.
Yeah, totally.
What resources did you go to, if any, or how did you make the determination and say, you know what, this happened to me, even if it was internalized and not really saying it to anybody, but just to classify it and just understand what happened to you?
Yeah. So I think like I just realized that in my 20s that my anger management problems, a lot of it stems from like things that I went through as a kid. And like, you know, I love my mum and dad, but like there was certain situation that happened when I was younger, which I was like, oh, a kid shouldn't have seen that or witnessed that, from like domestic issues and stuff. And then there was just like obviously that experience of like, you know, me feeling like, was that sexual abuse? Was that kind of rapey? Like, what was that? I just always saw it as like an experience, and it was kind of my fault and stuff. And then I realized, like, as I gotten older and stuff, I was clearly like acting out in anger because of like things that I'd gone through as a kid. A lot of blaming and a resentment against my parents. And I did just kind of go a bit like spirally and stuff, especially when I ended a really like important relationship where I was with someone for 3 years. And I think I was just like, you know, life's shit, everything's shit. I've gone through so much shit. So then I was like revolving around a lot of like alcohol and drugs and stuff. And then I was like having a bit of like a lost identity crisis as well, like at 25. And then I went traveling, and then I realized like, okay, if I want to like sort this out and, you know, really try and heal from any stuff that I've gone through and really try and like learn and educate, because I'm always constantly telling people how they need to open up more, how they need to be honest with what they've gone through and what they're feeling and stuff. And I was like, why am I not taking on the same advice? So then I came back from my travels and I was like, okay, clearly like my temper and my anger problem stems from shit I've gone through. So then I did have a therapy session about it and stuff. And I had a few sessions and then I put it on pause, but I'm looking to like kind of get back into it now. But that, even just that one step, like was like massive for me, because I was like, okay, I am talking about it. And then I remember like I was back at home and me and my boys were like just talking about experiences we went through when we were younger, and we were all like saying how it was like a close relative, and it was the weirdest thing. Like all the boys were like, oh, it wasn't rape, it wasn't this, it nearly could have been. And it was like this massive like defense mechanism, like they didn't go through it and they're happy they didn't go through it, and they were like a man enough to control it. But I was like, whether it went all the way or not all the way or whatever, that's still sexual abuse. You know, it's a spectrum of, you know, things. And I was like, we're all in denial here. And then, yeah, I talked to my like therapist about it. I blogged about it a few times as well, about like the experiences. And then like the sexual abuse was even happening at times like when I was like really drunk and stuff like that. And it even happened, I talked about it on a post, with a female and another male and stuff when I was really, really drunk. And it was just like really messed up. And I was like, clearly there is an issue here that I'm having and it's kind of spiraling. I'm losing control. I'm clearly avoiding everything. And I'm using liquor and these stupid things to numb my situation. And I think a lot of men, they're escaping from their reality. They want to numb the pain that they've gone through when they're younger. They don't want to talk about it. But yeah, I guess therapy, talking to my group of friends, and then I guess blogging about it and just being more honest was the way that it kind of helped me. And just realizing like those two things link. I wasn't just an angry person for the sake of it. You know, I wasn't just like in my 20s pissed at the world for no reason. It's like this thing that happened to you when you're younger is the reason why you are like this at 25 or 26 and stuff. And the link to that, I know it sounds really like just stupid, but I just didn't see the link. And I was like, oh, those, like, I just did not see it. But like once you start making that link and just being honest, then yeah, I think that's the kind of way to heal through that.
Wish we were next to you so we could give you a big giant hug.
I know. I said I really want to fly out to New York and see you guys so many times. So that hug will be happening.
It will. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's nothing you and you can't possibly be the person that's distilling everything down on your own. Yeah. Like you said yourself, it's not your fault. And so the fact that you took those steps and recognized we're so thankful that you did. Because then we have to have, you know, a friend in you who is brave and inspirational to talk about it. So
well, thank you guys as well. I mean, for sharing all your personal experiences and the platform that you're kind of, you know, happy to discuss these things and educate people. Like, you know, it's such a collaborative important kind of message that we're putting out there. So yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
And keep doing the amazing work you're doing.
You too.
Because I'm like proud of you guys.
Us too.
Us too. We're so proud of you and so grateful for you to have known you and also continue to know you. What we're also going to do is pull some links and resources at the end of this, and we're going to post it in our post as well, just for people to talk to if they feel like anybody who's listened to this needs to talk to somebody. So Ram, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're grateful, and thank you for sharing your story. Well, thanks guys. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and always remember, don't worry about
Look, yeah,